Hey, welcome to the Zoop podcast. I'm filling in for Jordan tonight. Speaking to our friend Reilly Brown, a friend of the Zoop podcast. This is Chance, like I said, filling in for Jordan. Tonight we're doing something a little bit different. I'll be chatting with Reilly, host of the Hypothetical Island podcast, also a comic book artist best known for his work on Deadpool, Spider-Man, and the enormously best-selling Batman Fortnite crossover miniseries. Before we get started, though, be sure you're following us on social media and subscribe to the show on Spotify, iTunes, and show your support by giving us 5-star review. If you're joining us live tonight, you can join in the conversation simply by commenting on whatever social media channel you're watching. It'll show up in the chat here. And send your questions and comments to Reilly our way. Finally, be sure to check out all ongoing and upcoming campaigns at soup.gg. Also, be sure to check out Reilly's work. I'm going to throw up some QR codes here. But yeah, thanks for joining us tonight,
Hey,
Reilly.
Chance, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, what I wanted to talk about specifically with you tonight is your podcast. You kind of have an interesting premise,
The
the
hypothetical island.
hypo podcast. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
it's a lot of fun. It started with me and my buddy George O'Connor. We used to share an art studio in Brooklyn together, where we shared it with a whole bunch of other comic book artists, and eventually, I had kids, so I moved out to the suburbs, and then during COVID, the rest of the studio kind of fell apart. And we'd always talked about doing a podcast, but we never quite got around to it. We made a couple of attempts, but we never really got into a groove. And during the whole COVID shutdown situation, um, I just was talking to George on the phone. Was like, dude, it's time. Let's actually get this podcast going. And so we started doing it, and we've been doing it ever since, and it's been a lot of fun. The
Yes.
Oh
Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say the premise is it's just comes from something that we would do in the studio a lot, because George would hate it if it got too quiet, so he'd always come up with just stupid excuses to get conversations going. And one of the most popular, little games that he would play, one of the most recurring things that we do was the hypothetical island situation, which was pretty much like, you know, you're lost at sea, you're stuck there in the water, but there's two islands equally far away. Uh, and which one do you swim to? And then you have to find out through asking questions what are the differences between the islands. And inevitably, one of them is filled with shit, and the other one is a nice island, but you're made of shit. So it's like, which one do you choose? And there's a variety of different spin-offs of that general concept. And so, we started doing this, and it was a lot of fun. And um, every week we have other comic book artists, animators, toy designers, all sorts of cool creative people come onto the island and talk to us about whatever the random situation is, but also talk about their career and project. And it's fun. It's a fun way for artists to hang out and just talk about craft and stuff.
Yeah. So, can you give me like an example of a couple episodes? Like, I was looking at your most recent one. I think it was about Wolverine, or maybe it was the one before that. But yeah, give us an example or two of what.
You know what? Let me look them up to jog my memory, because one of the weird things I found about recording podcasts every week is after I record it, I have absolutely no recollection of what we talked about. So, um,
I mean, as we get into, you're a busy guy,
yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, it is funny because I'll re-listen to it and be like, "Oh yeah, that was a smart thing that guy said." I'm like, "Oh wait, that's me." So, um, let me see. Where is my list? Well, I'll tell you one of my favorite ones was
yeah,
it's one of the early ones was what? How did it go? There, one island was, oh yeah, you're stuck on an island with there's a bunch of people. They just kind of sit around. They don't do anything. They're more or less in a vegetative state. But there's no other food or any plant life or animals or anything else on the island. It's just full of all these people, tons of them, just sit there doing nothing, taking up space. And if for some reason you were to take a bite out of one of them, it would taste like whatever delicious fruit you could imagine. Like one of them would taste like strawberries, one of them would taste like pineapple, whatever. And they just sit there and they don't care. You could just chow down on them, no problem. The other island has no people at all, but it's full of beautiful orchards and gardens, full of fruit and vegetables and all this stuff. And if you were to pick one of those apples or one of the strawberries or blueberries or whatever and take a bite, it would scream bloody murder. And so, which island do you choose? Chance, which one would you
Def-
choose?
Obviously, the second
The
one.
second one, you'd rather have the
Yeah,
food that screams at you
with no people.
than have to feel like you're eating another human being. Even if it's a
Well, so
delicious strawberry flavored human being?
the part that was actually kind of coincidental that you mentioned about the second island, you said there was no people there, and like I feel like that's framed as almost kind of like, oh, that's a bad thing. But I was listening to a podcast on my way home from work tonight that was talking about like, seeking validation from other people, or even like depending on interactions with other people as being like the ultimate form of gratification. That's such like a lost cause, or like you know a self-fulfilling prophecy of something that's doomed to fail. And like if you can just sit in a room, just like a bare room, and just find peace and happiness with that, like that's something to strive for. So when you said that about the island, I was like, oh, well, that makes that I can kind of connect. That's what I was listening to
Well,
earlier with the vacant island. But then I have the screaming
yeah, there's not
food.
peace or happiness. There's screaming fruits and vegetables that are
I could
mad at
deal with
you
that.
because you keep eating them, and they hold
So
grudges. And the other
are the
island, it's full
fruits and
of people, but they're mostly ignoring you. They don't know whether you come or go. So they're
well, that's pretty much my life anyway.
exactly.
No, so I mean, like in the second island though, is like the fruits and vegetables sentient, or are they just when that's just what I hear when I bite into it?
Um, they it's
Self-aware?
hard to know how sentient they are. The only times that they actually communicate with you are the screams of pain when you're eating them. I
Okay,
mean, you could
so they
talk to
are
them if
like
you want.
yeah,
Who knows if they don't really have ears.
yeah, but they feel pain. Man, so I would feel bad about that. I
Oh,
guess
I
I'd
mean,
have to go through
and
the
let's be honest, we don't know that apples and strawberries don't feel pain. They just can't scream at us. On this island, they can.
sure. Man, you just like whole nother
Gotta
like
choose, Chance. You gotta choose. Um,
so like how do you like tie that into comic related topics then?
oh, well, frequently, uh, frequently the concept at the beginning will tie into the creator or their project or their career in some way, or
Okay.
it just won't, and it'll just be a bunch of dudes talking about some stupid nonsense, and maybe we tie it in or we if we want, but it's just kind of like I don't know, just fun. It's just the type of stupid fun conversations we'd have in the studio. But then after
Yeah.
the island segment, then we get into just more of a traditional interview where we talk about art
Okay.
and careers and comics and stuff like that.
And something I've thought about increasingly over the years regarding podcasts is how critical and important it is to come up with like very original and niche ideas. Uh, the only it seems like the only way that you can really get something off the ground anymore is discuss it rather than discussing like a broad range of topics, is like finding something very like unusual or niche, like what you're talking about.
Could be. I mean, I don't, you know, uh, well, I mean, one of the things as creators, you're on a lot of podcasts doing interviews, and you kind of learn that a lot of them, you're just having the same conversations over and over again. You're talking about how you broke into the industry. You're talking about, whatever you're trying to hype your most recent project. And so we were just kind of looking for some other interesting thing to talk about that is not the same exact questions people get all the time. And then we'll frequently get into those same exact questions. Like we do a lot of, asking people how they got into the industry and stuff like that. Because a lot of times those are interesting stories. And it's fun to, I think coming from a creator point of view, um, we might be able to bring a little bit more to that conversation just because we've been there ourselves than another podcaster might. But then, you have the hypothetical island situation where you're going to have, James Tynan talking about partying with a Yeti or what, like drinking beer with a Yeti or something like that, which is something you would not normally get on Word Balloon or whatever your other favorite comic book podcast is.
Well, and speaking of, you were giving me a hard time right before we went live. What are you drinking?
I've got a nice IPA here, a Southern Tier Brewing Company IPA. That's
All right.
yeah. I was asking you, it's like, can we drink on this podcast? And you said you don't, and I was just chance.
I
This
was
is
drinking
this
at
is the purpose of podcasting. It's a chance to get out, hang with your buddies, talk about comics, and drink beer, and tell your wife it's for work. That's what podcasts are all about. If you're not doing it, man, oh man, I don't know
wrong.
what the whole point is.
Right. Well, and I explained to you that like it's not that I don't drink. I'm just not. I had too much sake
Yeah.
last night, so I'm just
You
drinking tea
podcasted
tonight.
too hard yesterday. You got to take it easier today.
I got it.
Understandable.
I days mismatched, backwards because I wasn't even podcasting last night. I was just drinking sake. So
Without an
should have been
excuse. See,
drinking.
now you're in the doghouse.
Yeah, and I don't even have a wife. I don't even have a wife. So,
Well, now you know why. You're drinking too much
yeah.
without an excuse.
So yeah. So I mentioned some of the work that you've done in the industry. Like, where do you find the time to do the podcast and also all the work that you do that I mentioned at the front of the show, or is that just like how you wind down?
It's sort of the winding down thing. You talk to any comic book creator, scheduling is a nightmare. There's always more work to do than there are hours in the day. So you're lucky to get it all done. Um, but it like that, it's not just I was kind of joking about saying that podcasting is just a chance to drink and say it's for work, but it's honestly it is sort of a enforced socializing time once a week to talk to other friends of mine and stuff, and figure out a way to somehow make an excuse for myself that it's somehow related. Um, which I don't want to be the person that's like, okay, make every part of your life a hustle, but it is kind of like when your whole life's a hustle anyway. It's like let's carve out an hour a week to at least talk with your friends and try to make that you know
Constructive
constructive,
somehow, yeah.
exactly. And the other thing was
Right.
it was like, um, it's hard to do comics and I'm not, especially with the kids and everything. And, as you get older, family life it becomes a bigger priority that it's not like when I was 20 years old and I could just like go into my room for 3 weeks straight and nobody sees me and I'm just working the whole time. I just can't get away
Right.
with that anymore. So I was like, I need some kind of product that I can put out without without as big of a labor commitment that I can just do regularly and reliably. And this
Mhm.
just made sense. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty of this format is, I mean, it's kind of like a double-edged sword because like in some ways anybody can
yeah,
do it. If you have a cell phone,
yeah,
you can record something on iTunes. So like, but there's a certain standard to get above everybody else, but at the same time, like it is very accessible and it can be leisurely in the way that you're describing, and it doesn't have to be something stressful, but it can still be something productive. So I've found a lot of gratification in that way as well.
yeah.
So
It's fun, and it is a really good excuse to, at least the way we do ours. It's a great excuse to kind of just connect with other creators. A lot of them are friends, or they're people that I've just met at conventions that it's kind of like we always mean to spend time together but never get around to it. It's like, oh yeah, now it's like I have an excuse to like talk to you about something. And sometimes, they'll just be like, people that I'm a fan of or George is a fan of that we'll reach out to. Like, um, we're both big Masters of the Universe fans, and so we've had a bunch of animators and sculptors and stuff from that whole thing come on, and it was just like just fun to be geeks about something. But then
yeah, well,
also some of the things have led to have led to work also, which is pretty cool. Like, we talk to somebody and then all of a sudden, like a week or so later, it's like, oh, hey, wait, I just made a new connection that can help me out with something. And that is pretty great too.
Yeah, and it's kind of those moments of you're not looking for it; it just kind of happens upon
Yeah,
itself. And yeah,
exactly.
you mentioned George O'Connell. Is that
George
right?
O'Connor. Yes.
And he's your co-host.
Yes, he's the writer and artist of a series of books about the Greek gods, called The Olympians,
Okay.
and it's a wildly successful series. It's awesome. He's had so much, like, he just wrapped up, because it's 12 books, one for each of the main Greek gods. He just released Dionysus like a month or two ago, and that was the last one. And now he's going to move on to doing some books about the Norse gods, which is pretty awesome
Wow,
also.
very yeah, that's a really interesting idea. So let's talk a little bit about Batman Fortnite, if that's right.
Oh,
So
totally.
I hiding under a rock for several years, and I know that Fortnite is popular with kids, and I know that it's digital, but not much more beyond that. Like it's an open world video game, right?
It's a free for all game. So I
Okay.
and I don't, I since working in comics, I have not had too much time to play video games very much, so I'm kind of out of the loop. I think this is a whole genre that sort of works this way. Fortnite's the only game like this that I've played with any regularity, but basically you're on an island and everyone's trying to kill each other, and there's like this storm that's slowly closing in, and so it shrinks the field of play until it's really small at the very end. And the idea is it kind of corrals everyone together so they have to kill each other off, but also early on gives you plenty of time to explore the island and all the cool stuff that's there. um so
Okay.
and it's a ton of fun. It's actually like, I'm not a big first person shooter guy, but this is like the one first person shooter game that the controls just came naturally to me, and I've actually had a lot of fun playing it.
Yeah. So what was that like your first sort of like gaming gig that you've had, or
Uh,
what was
I
that?
mean, my first major one, I've done other things like, I did some Mega Man covers and stuff like that, in the past, which was fun. But this one, I was working directly with Donald Mustard, who's the creator of Fortnite, and his, creative team. Like, I was helping to design the costumes that Batman and Catwoman and Deathstroke were going to wear in the video game and stuff like that, because they were also going to be in the
Awesome.
comic. So it was really
Yeah.
cool getting in there, and like, because it was such a big project for DC, and Donald Mustard is good friends with Jim Lee. Like, it was really weird because it was like I'm working with these two of the biggest franchises on the planet, but it felt like doing self-published comics. Like, it was really a kind of a wild trip where it's like, oh, can we do that with Batman? It's like, let me call up Jim and I'll convince him and it'll be cool. And it's just like that. And so that was pretty awesome.
So when you say it was like a self-published comic, like explain that, like how so? Did you just feel like you had more
Well,
freedom, or
yeah, just in that, like, I guess when you are working with the guy that created the thing and runs the company, to him it is a
yeah,
self-published comic. And it's like when you're just in the pipeline somewhere for the average franchise comic book, there's all sorts of levels of approval or uh, editorial, whatever, that you have to go through. Um,
sure,
and in this, I was just talking directly with the guy that makes the rules. So, you know,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
So as long as we were
Yeah,
on the same page, and we were, like, every single time, so it was great.
that's awesome. That's really cool. So how would you compare? I mean, besides what you just described there, like what's that experience like versus just publishing straight to a comic book?
Um, well, I mean, I guess I don't really understand the question, because it was what I
So
worked on was the comic book. I wasn't working on the video game.
oh, all right. And that's I guess, and again, that's where I'm like out of the
Oh,
loop
yeah.
as far as that world is concerned. So is there like a like a comic book tie-in, or
Okay, yeah,
how
yeah.
does that
Okay,
work?
so an important thing. to know about Fortnite is that it was also, other than being just a massively popular video game, it was a real, like, it had a really revolutionary business model where, and sorry if this is getting a little inside baseball and a little boring for the listeners, it's all businessy stuff. But it, it's really interesting because it was like a free to play game. Like anyone could download the game for free. And but then you can buy, like, there are different ways of buying new characters and stuff like that, and they all play the same. Like, it's not like you're not, um it's not like a pay to win type of thing. It's like
Mhm.
every character is the same, it's just you're changing the look of the character. Uh, and you have the dancing and the emojis and whatever else you wanna buy. But through doing that, like, it because it was free and it's on every single platform, it just blew up and became incredibly popular, which made it a great sales platform for selling all these things, which, you know, really.
It's sort of a gateway.
Yeah, totally. And so there are tons of franchises that have made deals with Fortnite. So if you want to, like, be Darth Vader, they've made deals with Disney. Yeah, and there will also be limited, like, not everything that's for sale there is for sale forever. In fact, it's usually a very limited time. So it's like there'll be
Interesting.
characters that you can only buy this one day and then never again. So you got to get it right away. And so while I was doing this Batman thing, they had a big deal with DC where they had a bunch of DC characters that were available. And we also had codes in the comics. So if you wanted to get certain costumes, you had to buy the comic book, and other stuff like that. Like they really went all out, and like it was an amazing job marketing and bringing the sales in, and it obviously paid off.
Yeah, that's really synergetic.
Yeah.
Using all these multiple outlets and just under the umbrella of this one thing. That's really it makes me feel really old that I'm just like you're explaining this to me, and it's obviously like a really popular experience. So
Yeah, dude, get it.
so
It's
yeah.
like seriously, you could just get it for free. Like one of the while I was working on it, John Calitz, the colorist, like, he was asking me questions about this. I'm like, dude, like I can spend like an hour like explaining to you how this storm looks or how it works, or you could just download it. Like download it on your computer. Whatever you're typing to me right now with, just download the game and just play it and you'll see it in like 1 second. And so that was just an easy way to explain how how things went.
That's cool. All right. So what are you currently working on?
Right now I've got a
And actually, while you explain that, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna flash keep your gallery flashing and throw up a QR code for that for people to check out your
Oh yeah,
website too.
totally, man. And my Instagram page also, I'm always updating artwork there. Um, right now I'm working on a bunch of different, or some of them really random things, a bunch of cool stuff. I can't talk about much right now, but what can I talk about? Let's see. Well, one of my favorite projects right now is I'm doing a comic strip with my son, Will, who's in first grade, and he's always drawing his own superhero characters and stuff, and he's got this one guy, Thunder Guardian, that is really cool. And so we're doing a thing where he's telling me the story and then I'm drawing it in my professional superhero artist style. And it's a lot of fun, and it's kind of like just capturing the crazy imagination of youth, and his way of looking at the world. It's very funny. uh and so it's a comic strip that's going to be coming out in this. It's this brand new. Uh, I want to call it a comic, but it's not. It's like a newspaper, really. It's called A Kid and a Comic. It's the first one's not even out yet. It's coming out next month. Um, and it's like a newspaper, but the whole thing is comic strips, and like word search games and things like that. And there's some really great other professional comics creators that are doing it. And yeah, it's really cool. So I definitely recommend you check that out. A Kid and a Comic. And
And where can we follow that? Did you mention your Instagram page?
yeah, Instagram, Twitter, where I've been talking about it a lot lately because it's getting down to the wire when it comes to ordering it. But they do have subscriptions. So you could just subscribe and they'll mail it right to your house. So I've got that going on. And what else? There's a new collection of the Cable and Deadpool series now called Deadpool and Cable. Deadpool has somehow eclipsed Cable, and so he's got top billing now. There's a new collection of that. It's like an omnibus of like the entire 50 issue run from 2000 what 3 to 2008 or whenever that however long that series lasted. So that's coming out, which is pretty exciting. It's always good to see that in print again. I don't know. I think that's all I can really say at the moment. So yeah, we'll leave it at that for now.
And the first one that you mentioned that you're doing with your son, a kid in his comic book, did you mention who's publishing that, or is that crowdfunded, or?
It's not crowd. It's just I don't, you know what? I don't think there's a publisher. I think it's just called A Kid and a Comic. It's hang on, let me see. It's not through a major publisher. It's just kind of like a startup thing, because it was something I'd been wanting to do with something I'd been talking about with my son for a while, and I just needed an excuse to do it. And then at a comic convention, somebody said, "Hey, like I'm trying to do this thing." And I was like, "Dude, that would be perfect for what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do with my kid, like just do a comic strip every month or two." Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
a kid and a comic.com is what it's called. And that's everything. That's the publisher, that's the product, that's the whole thing.
awesome.
And yeah, but like, so the opportunity was there and I was just like, yeah, cool, let's do it. And then later on, I realized I learned like, all the other cool creators that are part of it. Like I I mean there's a ton, but like Tony Harris, yeah, B. Claymore is writing some, Mark McKenna, Scott Hanna. There's just a ton of awesome creators. They're all part of this. Like some of them are funny strips, some of them are horror. There's a lot of horror stuff that's pretty cool. But it's it's fun. It's really cool.
Cool. And thanks for the comic from Ryan. Said he's excited for the book, so it's
Yeah,
good.
awesome, man. Yeah.
Thanks for that shout. One thing Jordan likes to end on is, and this is relevant with your podcast. He always asks everybody that comes on the show, your desert island. If you're stranded on a desert island, which you have a lot of experience with, what would be your desert island run?
My desert island run? Am I
You're
running?
like your collection. No, like if you could only have like one collection or omnibus or like one
Oh.
book with you, like what would it be?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's tough. Like how long, like can I say like Spider-Man and then have like 60 years worth of comics, or does
He said put any parameters on it, so I mean, I guess technically that would suffice, like if you're gonna be
I feel like that's
doing
cheating. That's like almost too easy. What would it be? I'm looking at my bookshelf
that
right
might
now.
on the list is like the like most broad answer that anybody's given.
I think I'd have to go with I mean, if I'm being completely honest and just looking at my bookshelf, I'd have to go with Jim Lee's X-Men run.
Okay.
Because I'm just like, there are so many times where I've bought essentially the same comic just in different sizes or different formats. This one's black and white. This one's colored. This one's recolored. This one's 2 feet tall or whatever.
Yeah,
that
right. Sort of.
Yeah, that like that's obviously the series and the run that speaks the most to me.
All right. And follow up with that is, what would be your dream collaboration?
Dream collaboration. Let me think. I mean, I honestly working with my son is a lot of fun. Like that's, if there's any other parents out there, if you can put up with your kid long enough to get a story out of them, it is ridiculously fun. Um, let's see but let's say like, let's
Or
talk
it
to
just depends
seasoned
on.
professionals and not these rookies. Let me think. Um, I mean, it's always fun working with Fabian. We recently had our series Outrage. The first season just came out in print, but it came out in print through Rocket Ship, and it's still available from them. But also, we had 2 seasons up on Webtoon, where it's still up there for free if you want to check that out. But he was honestly, it was his X-Men stuff. It was after Jim Lee left, but that's when I first started reading. So he was kind of the writer that got me hooked in comics. And so working with him already was kind of a pretty big, bucket list thing. And that was like my first gig, and my most recent. But okay, so let's see let's pick somebody
I
who.
was gonna say, that's actually that's a interesting answer because last week somebody was like, "Well, I'm only gonna name dead people because I don't wanna offend anybody that I would on the list," but you're smart in naming somebody that you're collaborated
Well,
with already, so
also if if he happens to hear this, he'll give me shit if I don't say him. But but also I want I want to rule him out because I've already worked with him. I can work with him again if I want. Who have I not worked with that I'd like to? Yeah, I'm friends with James Tynan, and we've never actually worked on anything together. And I love his stuff, so that would be a lot of fun. Um, I think he writes characters with a lot of personality, which is something that I really like to draw. So I think that could be pretty cool.
cool.
Yeah. So if I only
And
get to
somebody
pick one, I guess James. Don't tell him I
that's
said that
great.
though. That's so nerdy.
Throw the cats out,
Yeah.
really.
Zeb Wells. Zeb Wells. His stuff actually. Yeah. Let's say Zeb Wells. Forget James. Don't want to work with James anymore. Call up Zeb. I've never met him. I don't know a thing about him, but his comics are some that really kind of they're just fun and over the top and so well done. I think that he'd be a fun guy to work with. I think we'd do some good stuff together.
Cool. All right, well, I'll get out of your hair. I really appreciate your time tonight and joining us and talking about your work and your podcast. Again, check out James's podcast, The Hypothetical Island. I'm going to throw that
Riley's
QR code
James.
there. I'm
Who's
sorry.
James?
you're just
Forget James.
you're just talking about James. You
James
said
got
forget
fired.
James,
We hired Zeb instead.
and he's at the front of my brain, and you said to forget about him. Check out the Hypothetical Island podcast. I threw the QR code up there. Again,
Jordan's been on the podcast too. We have a lot of Zoop representation.
right? Yeah,
And Jordan was
yeah,
on
and that's why.
one with it was a lot of fun. So look for his episode.
All right. So again, yeah, if you're listening to us on whatever platform, be sure to follow us. Give us those good 5-star reviews, iTunes, Spotify. You know where to find us. And Reilly, I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
You bet.